Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Welcome to Grief to Growth Podcast. Your host is Bryan Smith, spiritual seeker, best-selling author, grief survivor, and life coach. Bryan believes that the worst tragedies of life provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Bryan says he was planted, not buried, and he is here to help you grow where you've been planted by the difficulties in life. In each episode, Bryan and his guests will share what has helped them to survive and thrive. It is his sincere hope this episode helps you today.
Hey there, everyone. Before I play the interview, I have to apologize to Paige. I was not a very good host, and I really should have talked about her website more and her book to let you know where you could reach her. So where you can reach her is paigewlee.com. That's Paige, Paige, wlee.com. That's Paige's website. And her book is Choose to Believe, A Story of Miracles, Healing, and the Afterlife. And that's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I assume wherever fine books are sold. But wanted to get that out before I started the interview. So check out the book. It sounds like it's a fantastic book. I got so involved with the conversation with Paige, I forgot to mention that during the wrap up. So I'm putting it right up here up front. Thanks a lot. Hey, everybody, this is Bryan Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got with me Paige Lee. Paige is a fellow Shining Light parent. And if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that in a moment. But I'm going to read her introduction and then we'll get started. Paige's spiritual awakening came abruptly and forcefully after her 23-year-old son, Bryan, was brutally murdered in September of 2008. Just as the only world she'd ever known was shattered, a new world opened. A world filled with hope, spirit, and love, a world that allowed her not only to continue having a relationship with her son, but a world that opened her own true self into being. Paige is dedicated to helping people who have experienced a profound loss, face and release their emotions, and find a way to then joyfully connect with their loved one in spirit. She's the author of the new book, Choose to Believe, A Story of Miracles, Healing, and the Afterlife. In the book, she shares her after-death experiences with her son, Bryan, and she outlines a detailed pathway toward healing, all the while encouraging the reader to make their own connections with their loved one after death. So with that, I want to welcome to Grief to Growth, Paige Lee.
Thanks, Bryan. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here and to meet you. And just to let everyone know what a Shining Light parent is, in case they don't know what it is, what that is, that's a parent who has a child in spirit. And we don't say that our children are dead because we don't believe they're dead. We don't believe that they died, but that they are in spirit. And that they are shining lights, and that we can become shining lights. And it sounds like, Paige, you've already made that transition after the passing of your son.
Thankfully, yes. Thankfully, blessedly, I was led on that path. Yes, like instantly led on that path.
Yeah. Well, tell me about Bryan and tell me about your path.
Okay. All right. I just love this beautiful picture of Shayna behind you. So what a beautiful, and I was reading your blog, by the way, and that her name means beautiful light. Is that right? Is that
yes.
what it was?
Yes, it does.
I love that. And here you are, a shining light parent. So, anyhow.
Yeah.
Connection. Bryan, oh, what a sweetheart. Bryan was 23 when he died. I do say when he died because his physical body did die. So, but I do believe that he still lives, if that makes sense. But his spirit still lives. Only the body ever dies. And he was at school at University of Southern California He had finished his economics degree. So he had started at West Point. Let me just tell the whole story. He had started at West Point. He left after a year and a half on an honorable discharge because he just flat out didn't like it. And it wasn't for him. He transferred to Boulder, Colorado for a semester while he waited to hear back from USC. They accepted him. So he went to USC. He finished his economics degree there. And then he immediately enrolled and was accepted into the film school at USC. So he was super excited, really wanted to kind of move out of the economics business world and into the more creative arts, be a director world. And he was one semester, I was going to say 6 months, one semester away from graduating when he was killed. So, it was devastating, tore us apart. I mean, of course, all of that. He was my only birth child. I do have two beautiful stepchildren. I had two babies that I miscarried and a baby that was stillborn. So for me, Bryan was my one and only. My husband and I married in 1998. So he had been a big part of Bryan's life as well. So, it just rocked us. It rocked us. It just tore me apart. He was killed in a random act of violence, walking home one evening from a bar that he'd been at with two friends, and they'd had a couple drinks and they were walking home, and it was a new apartment and they weren't familiar. It was just off campus. And, they walked by this building and Bryan slammed the gate shut, and that was all it took. And somebody came, running out, and they engaged in a fight. And, Bryan and the boys, after the fight, Bryan and his two friends started to kind of walk away, and the guy went back into his apartment, ran back out with a knife, and, one final blow. And then that was it. So just, random, but yet I've come to not believe in random, which is a really tough conversation to have with people. But, for my own sanity, I had to get to the point where I believed and I understood, that it wasn't random, that Bryan's soul recognized that this was an exit that he chose to take, because that kid, let me tell you, probably like your Shayna, that kid lived more in his 23 years than most of us do in a lifetime. And he was always just off and running to the next thing and, the next accomplishment. He won so many awards. I would put you to sleep if I listed them all. Super smart, straight A kid, athletic, all of that. And so, of course, we miss his physical presence immensely, of course, and I always will. But he's with us. He's with me all the time. And we now work together in helping other parents, just like you and Shayna do.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that it seems like a lot of times when our kids die early, that they do live life like full out. And I talk to a lot of parents that have had children that have died early, and it's almost always they lived a certain way, that it was almost like they knew they weren't going to be here for a long time and they wanted to squeeze everything in.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It does seem to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've made the transition now into, your kind of healing, and you've seen, the bigger picture, but what was it like when you first found out that Bryan had been murdered?
Oh gosh. I do, the first two chapters in my book are about that. That phone call, right? It all started with that phone call at 5 a.m. And when I first found out, I'll never forget the name of the dean of students at USC at the time. His name was Michael Jackson. Oh, wow. And so that's a name you don't forget. Yeah. And, but his roommate had called me at 5 a.m. and he had been, he's like, Bryan was in a fight. That's all I know. Cause he was not one of the boys with him. And, would you call the hospital and find out what's going on? I'm here, but they won't tell me anything. So I called the hospital, and because Bryan was an adult, they would tell me nothing. Yeah. And, so that was so frustrating. And then the next call came from Michael Jackson, and he said, so your child has died. And I just screamed. I just screamed and dropped the phone. And, for the longest time, probably for a couple of years, I would wake up at 5 a.m. I would wake up when that phone call came in.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's so traumatic on our psyche and our being physically and mentally and emotionally, that it was just a trigger for me. And so I would just wake up and just cry, certainly for the first 6 months anyway, if not longer.
Yeah.
So somebody made reservations for us to get to LA. I don't know who. And we met Bryan's dad and stepmom at the airport, and we all went to LA. And, I don't remember a lot. I talk about it a little bit in my book, but it's also vague. I do remember that my husband's great niece, we call her a niece, and she really acted as if and was a cousin to my son and my nephew. Mm-hmm. And she was in the basement. And I always felt so sorry for her that she had to be there that day because she didn't live with us. And so I've always felt so sorry for her that she had to witness that at just like a 15-year-old, your daughter was what, 13, 12?
She was 15.
Shayna died. Oh, yeah. Your daughter, Shayna was 15, right?
Yeah. My other daughter was 18.
Okay. 18. Mm-hmm. Anyhow. So it was just like living in a dream, I guess is really all I can describe it. We went to LA, we went through all the motions. We were greeted at the airport by these officials from USC and some of Bryan's friends, thankfully, because they were the humanity part of the equation. Right. Mm-hmm. And, we were just kind of like guided to USC and to the president's office. And it was miserable. It was awful. It was like the last thing I wanted to be doing the day of me hearing that my son had died. And so it was just horrible. And I remember waking up the next morning in the hotel and just staring in the bathroom mirror. And I just was like trying to make sense of like, who is this woman in the mirror? And why are tears just streaming down her face? And, mm-hmm. You're just like confused, right?
Yeah. There's just this dissociation that comes about. And there's this unreal feeling like you're walking through a dream or through a fog. And it's hard for anybody that hasn't gone through it to understand. So when you say that you don't really remember a lot of it, I think, I understand that. And that surreal feeling when you know that your life has changed forever, just in that moment.
You just can't comprehend it for the longest time. And I just kept expecting him to walk in the room or it's just like that phone call and they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Oh, thank goodness it was a mistake. It wasn't Bryan who died. Right. I mean, I wished that for months and months. And it's just such devastation. And that's why Helping Parents Heal is such a beautiful organization because we can help shine light on other people's journeys, and we can share with them that's exactly how we reacted. That's exactly, where our journey took us, and that's how we felt, and that's how we experienced things. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want people to know that they're not crazy. They're not alone. They're not crazy. They're not alone, that we've been there and we do understand. And so while everybody's journey is unique, your journey in grief is going to be different than my journey, but yet there's so many similarities. Mm-hmm. We walk so much of a similar path that I think we can all resonate with each other's stories.
Yeah.
While recognizing that each journey is unique.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing about being in Helping Parents Heal, which we're both part of, and you're a caring listener, and we'll talk about that a little bit also. Yeah. But, no matter how our children transition, for me anyway, I see some people in the organization say, well, my child died by suicide, and my child died by cancer, and my child died by murder. And those things are all different, but we still share the same journey. There's still something universal about what we go through, whether it was a long-term thing or a sudden thing. So I can still relate to, what you went through, and getting that phone call. For me, I found my daughter, but it's the same thing. It's just, they're here one minute, the next minute they're not, and you think it's a normal day, and you find out this is the day that your life changed.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode.
Forever. I mean, forever the worst day of your life. When I took Bryan to West Point, I don't know if you know much about military academies, but we're there and we go through the line and we do the, whatever signups. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, moms, dads, say goodbye to your child. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? I mean, I'm like, no, I was not prepared for that. And, and I had always said that was the worst day of my life. They didn't even give me time. And then the next time I saw him, he had no hair and he, he looked defeated. He just they broke him down. And little did I know that the worst day of my life was yet to come, that day was really a day that probably helped turn him into, a man. But as a mother, I was grieving the loss of my little boy at that moment, knowing that he would come back to me a man. And when, with death, it's different. And so one of my biggest lessons in this journey that I've been on for 12 years now, which is that's shocking, just like it was shocking in the beginning. And I remember telling people, I am not going to survive a week. How am I going to go on? How am I going to survive a week or a month or a year or 5 years? It's absolutely unconscionable that I can live the rest of my life. I was 49, I think, at the time. And and now here it is 12 years later, right? It's just, but one of the things that I had to embrace that took such a long time was understanding that not only that he still lives, but that if I choose to meet him where he is now and embrace him as the soul that he is now, that's huge. That's a big deal, because I had to kind of let go of the need to have him here as Bryan in the physical, with his face and his dimple and his hair and his bushy eyebrows. I can remember him in that way. And he does still sometimes appear to me in that form, because that's dear to my heart. And that's how I remember him. But that's not who he is now, right? Who he is now is this beautiful light being soul that connects with me on a much deeper level, honestly, than we ever connected when he was here in physical form as my son. So that was a huge part of my journey. And I think a huge part of what got us to the point where we can communicate the way that we do.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's really important for people in those early days. And I listened to your interview earlier with Suzanne Giesman, and you touched on this idea that, that we can go on, that because as a parent, my daughter was 15 when she died, when she transitioned, and my other daughter had just gone to college. So I'd gone through that morning, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we have Shayna for 3 more years in the house, because she was only going into 10th grade. So we've at least got this time with her. So when she was suddenly gone, I was like, I don't want to be here. I mean, not only did I think I couldn't survive, I was like, I didn't want to survive. And I had a mother, ask me just a few days ago. She said, could you talk on your program about suicide, about parents that are surviving, because nobody wants to talk about that. And I heard you tell Suzanne that it was something that you had thought about. And so just tell me about that. Tell me about what you went through.
In regard to the wanting to die myself. Well, I did want to die, or I thought I wanted to die.
Yeah.
Right? It was a difference. And so I really thought I wanted to die because I couldn't imagine my life without my son. And, Bryan being my only living birth child, since I had lost 3 babies prior to him. And I do have 2 beautiful stepchildren. I have a stepdaughter from a previous marriage many years ago, and I love them all dearly. I do. But your own birth child is, a little bit of a different connection. And so the thought of not having him in my life, I just kept saying, if I can't be Bryan's mom, who am I? Like, I didn't have any other identity, even though I had jobs and I had careers. I just, all of my identity was wrapped into him. How could I help him? When was I going to see him again? Do I need to bring you home? Are we coming to you? What do you need? And so I just couldn't imagine what I would do if not that. And so I just kept thinking in the back of my mind, just end it. Dwayne, my husband, he'll be fine. He's got his kids. We had a granddaughter at the time, and now we have 5. Now we have 5, but we had 1 then. And he'll be fine, and he's got his business. And it just kept nagging at me. And Bryan had a little red Ford Ranger truck that we had given him for his birthday one year. And he and I had driven that truck all the way to LA when he went to enroll at USC. And it was quite the trip. The thing didn't run all that good. So we had to rev it up and take a big running, head start to get up the hill at Donner Pass, I think it was. And so just a lot of memories in that truck with him. And I didn't know what to do with the truck. His dad didn't want it. And so I decided to give it to my nephew, to Bryan's cousin, Kevin. And so I made arrangements about that's probably 7-8 months after Bryan died. So the following spring, Bryan died in September. And I told Kevin, I'm going to let you have the truck, but I'm going to take one more joyride in the truck. And so I got in, and, it was what do you call it? A 4-speed, not an automatic, a stick shift, a step manual. Thank you. And a stick shift. And I drove to a community outside of ours where there's a big reservoir that we always used to take the boys fishing, and so many memories of not so much fishing, but wakeboarding and fishing, and them jumping off the high bridge into the water, and just endless pictures and memories of those times. And so I drove there. And it's kind of a windy road, to get there. And there's a drop right from the edge of the road. There's no guardrail or anything like that. It's just this drop down into the reservoir. And I had that car going, the truck, as fast as it would go. I had Led Zeppelin blaring on the radio. It was our favorite band. And I was just lost. I was absolutely lost in my memories. And I just said, okay, this is it. I've been talking about, I want to die, and I'm going to do it. And I'll be honest and say, I think there was some part of my brain that was like, you're not really going to do it. But I understood that I had to put this to rest. I understood that I had to be done with this conversation because it was serving me no good whatsoever.
Right.
And so I just revved that truck up as far as it would go. Led Zeppelin blaring on the radio, and I swerved to the edge where the water is. And then at the last possible second, I slammed on the brakes. And I stopped, and I did not go in. And I just heard in my head, no, this is not the way. This is not to be your path.
Right.
And I understood that I just needed to test myself, I think is really what that was. It was a test for myself that my higher self or my subconscious self needed to do so that I could just be done with that conversation of suicide. So for me, it wasn't my path.
Right.
And just like in the earlier days, I drank wine. I drink a bottle of wine every night. And, that wasn't to be my path either. I had to stop doing that because I just had work to do. I think I've just always known that, how we just take our pain and we turn it into fuel to do really our great work. And I think that's why so many parents of children who have died do enter into this work to help others, whether we do it for free or whether we do it for compensation, which is fair. I think we're just driven to do that because the pain is so great. We have no other choice. We're either going to drown in our pain, right? Or we're going to use it as fuel to help other people. I think it's one or the other. So for me, suicide wasn't the answer. I do believe suicide is an option for people to exit. And I know a lot of moms whose children have left by suicide. And I think at the end of the day, we have to honor the choice the soul makes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that and being so vulnerable because so many people aren't. And for me, I never planned it, but I thought about it. And it was funny you talk about driving, because I remember one day I was driving back I was in Kentucky and I live in Ohio, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And I started thinking about Shayna, and I was like, I could just run into a bridge abutment and, and it would be over and I would be with her. And I think a lot of people, when they have these thoughts they've never had before in their lives, they think, well, something's wrong with me. I'm going crazy. But I heard you say this, and I agree. As a parent, I don't know who doesn't think about that. I mean, I guess there's some people that don't, but you want to be with your child. That's just a natural instinct. I think probably particularly for mothers, but for fathers also. We want to be with our kids. We want to protect them. We want to know they're happy and they're safe. So that thought comes. So I want to say to people that have had that thought, if you're planning suicide, then I encourage people to get help. And I don't want to ever feel like, it's very difficult to talk about this stuff with, honoring people's path.
I know.
But at the same time, telling people it's okay to have those thoughts. That doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Yeah. But like you, I ultimately said, okay, well, I've got work to do here, and I know how my daughter is and how she would greet me if I did do something like that. And I have other people I'm responsible to. I've got a daughter that I love very much, and I have a wife that I need to be here for, and I have work to do. Yeah. So we choose to stay, but for people that are going through that back and forth, that it's understandable.
It is understandable, and absolutely they should seek help from a professional. And I know as caring listeners, which we're going to talk about, we never really venture into that territory with any of our parents who call us, because we are not trained professionals.
Right.
So I do want to say that is my opinion. But I sought mental health professionals too, before and after. Well, not before that time, but after that time. Not because I was feeling suicidal, but for other reasons. So I do believe in that. And I think that everybody should seek whatever alternatives they can to actually, doing that.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's needed here. I think the reason we're still here is that we have a purpose, and that, somebody needs us, or there's work we haven't completed. So I think if we are still here, we probably have something we need to finish.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing I want to say to people is, whether you think suicide is right or wrong, or a path or not, one thing we know is the people that you leave behind, it causes tremendous pain. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something that we need to really think about, because we know how it felt when our kids transitioned or left. Right. And for us to do that to other people by our own choice, which I think we have to really think about the ripples that we're going to leave. A lot of times people don't realize how needed they are, how needed we all are.
Well, I think it adds that component of guilt that that maybe it's a big burden to bear. I can only imagine that it would be a huge burden to have to bear, because there would have to be some guilt. I know with the people I know who are living with that, have that. I've had some people reach out to me. I have a friend in New Zealand who wrote a beautiful letter to another mom about suicide, because her son did suicide, and anyhow, and her beliefs and how she came around to it. So she's given me her blessing to share that with people if it ever comes up. But
yeah.
So yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe the NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, well, I appreciate you going there with me, because someone just requested this like last week, and I was like, and she said, "Can you have a mother on or to talk about this?" I'm like, "I heard your interview with Suzanne. I heard you bring that up," and I'm like, I thought you'd be comfortable with talking about that, because I think it's really important for us not to feel alone when we're on this journey. And for people like, you're at 12 years, I'm at 5 years. And I remember what it was like when I was at a few months, and I saw someone at 5 years or 12 years, just like you, I was like, yeah, that's not going to be me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be here. And, Suzanne Giesemann talks about joy, and, we talk about being shining light parents. And I'm like, yeah, there's not going to ever be any joy again. So that's the feeling that you have in those first few days. I just talked to Mother a couple of nights ago, and she was just in tears because it's only been a couple of months. And I was like, it will get better, if we work at it.
Yeah.
So tell me how you made this transition. I mean, this, you go from being shattered, and so what happened then?
Well, I don't talk about in my book about the trial, but there was a trial. So they did catch the man who killed Bryan, and he's in prison. We'll be facing was it Suzanne's interview that we talked about that? But he'll be facing parole here probably in the next 5 years, I think. So that'll be kind of interesting. We'll see how spiritually evolved I am at that time. I mean, because that's going to be interesting, right? But we don't have to face that yet. 3 weeks after Bryan died, I was laying on my bed and I heard out loud with my ears, "Mom." I heard him cry out to me. It was out loud with my ears. And Bryan, my son's Bryan, you're Bryan. I jumped up and I'm just like, "Oh, Bryan, where are you? Like, I heard you. And of course I couldn't see him or find him. So I raced to my bookshelf and I'm like, nothing, no books on the afterlife. And so I went to the bookstore and I bought every book I could find on the afterlife. And the first book I read was George Anderson's Lessons from the Light. I think it is Lessons from the Light. And then 3 weeks after that, approximately, I went to the grocery store, which was my first kind of venture out because I'd been having horrible panic attacks. Like every time I would leave my house, I'd have a panic attack because my home, and I know many grieving parents will relate to this as well, my home was my safe haven and I did not want to leave it. I wanted to stay there with, at the time, my wine and my pictures and my memories and my music from the funeral, that I would just blare. I didn't want to leave the house. And I did on this day. And my husband, we went to the grocery store and there's a woman there with her husband in the produce department. And I know them and their son and our daughter dated and my son knew their son. And I'm just like instant, like a void, that feeling of, oh my, don't look at me. Like, I don't want to see the pity in your eyes. I do not want to see the pity in your eyes. And I know what you're thinking. I know what everybody in this store is thinking. You're thinking, I'm so glad it was her and not me, right? Yeah. That's what I thought. I thought they were all thinking, oh, I'm so glad. I'm so sorry for your pain, but I'm so glad it wasn't me. Yeah. Because we never think it will happen to us, right? We never think it will happen to us. It just happens to other people that we don't know. Yeah. And anyhow, so I'm avoiding her and I hear this voice, the voice, this is when the voice started really piping up and the voice said, go talk to her. No, I'm not going to go. I walk over to the grapes, the other end of the produce department. And, go talk to her. So after about the third nudge, I said, fine. I'm like talking out loud at this point, fine. And I go over there and I'm like, hi, Carol, how are you? And she goes, Paige, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. How's Bryan?
Oh, wow.
And I just melted. I mean, I literally just collapsed. And, she's like, oh my gosh. And so I told her, and I don't know how they didn't know. They live in my small community outside of Boise, but some people just don't watch the news or, and anyhow, so she says, remember, this is 3 weeks after I heard Bryan's voice. So I've become a seeker at that point. I'm seeking him. Where are you? How can I find you? Yeah. She says, what can I do to help? And I said, well, you don't happen to know of a psychic, do you? And she said, as a matter of fact, I'm really working on my spiritual development and I'm having a psychic message circle at my home in like 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I have 2 seats left. Would you like to come?
We'll get back to Grief to Growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Bryan is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Bryan as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Bryan and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.growth.com, or text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grief-to-growth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2GROWTH to make a financial contribution. And now back to Grief to Growth.
Oh, wow.
And I said, yes, I would like to come. And so everything is available to us, right? So we just have to be willing. I had to be willing to step out of my home and out of my comfort zone. I had to be willing to listen to that voice that had to nudge me 3 times before I went over there and did what they asked me to do, they being spirit. And in order to be able to receive this invitation to talk to my first psychic ever in my whole life.
Wow.
And that turned out to be an incredible, amazing experience. And I saw that man every month for a year. He's a very gifted, legitimate medium that lives outside of my community. He runs a church. He's just a beautiful, beautiful person. And I signed up that January. So it's like only 4 months after Bryan died. And I signed up for psychic development classes and angel and guide workshop. And I was a sponge, Bryan, anything and everything that I could learn. I was reading books like crazy because I was on a mission to find my son.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way you put that. You know, it's funny because you said that reminded me, I have a friend who's a medium, and the way we met was my daughter dropped in on her, and I walk every day. And so this friend was seeing my posts on Facebook of how many steps I take it every day. And she's like, this guy is really like walking like crazy, because I walk 7 miles every morning. Oh, wow. And she said, Shayna was telling her to reach out to me. So she reached out to me. She said, Shayna is saying that you're trying to catch up with her. And so, you know, when you said that we're seeking our children, I know someone else wrote a book about his son passing away, and his whole thing was, I'm seeking my son. So it's like I don't know what your religious background is, but a lot of us are, raised Christian. We think, well, they're in heaven, and that's good enough when it's an older person or something. But when it's our kid, it's like, we want to know more, and like, no, where are they really?
Yes, really. Because I have a chapter in my book about finding spirituality, because I also was raised Christian, Presbyterian, but mostly at Easter. So we get dressed up for Easter and all that. But I really didn't have an understanding of, I believed in a God. I believed in God. I used the term God. I believed in definitely a higher power, something greater than ourselves. I have a Bible. I've read parts of the Bible, but I've tried Bible study. I've tried every church you can imagine. With my son, actually, we went on a journey one year to find our church, and we never found it. And then after Bryan died, I found my church, and my church is here. And my church is here, and my God is here. And I believe in Christianity. I believe in God and Jesus, and I believe in the Bible. And the Bible, they even used the Bible as a tool for me once in getting assigned to me from Bryan on my first Mother's Day without him. So I don't want to give away every story in my book, but that's a really good one.
Yeah.
And but we almost died. Bryan and I almost died once before. And either God plucked his hand into that water and picked us out and placed us on the rocks, or his angels did, because we went from almost being drowned to sitting up on top of high rocks.
Oh, wow.
So what I say in the book is, I had felt God work in my life before. That's just the most extreme example of one way in which I had, but I had never really understood how God worked in my life directly until Bryan died. And now everything I do is, of God and to God, and trying to live in God's image, but trying to live in my son's image, not in his image, but to make him proud of me,
right?
And to do the work that I know that I'm left here to do, that we do together. So I believe it was pre-planned. I don't know if you do all that kind of stuff. And Sarah Rubel talks a lot about pre-birth planning. Dr. Journey of Souls is one of my favorite books, absolute favorite books. Dr. Michael Newton about pre-birth planning and what happens when we're in between lives. That there's just so much, right? There's so much information in 12 years, which is why I wrote the book, to try to get as much of it out as I could so people could know, because it's like, Tom Zub, I don't know if you know Tom, he likes to say, he wrote his book because it's the book he wished he could have read when his wife and 2 children died, right? This is the book that I wish I could have, my book is the book I wish I could have read so that I knew that I wasn't going crazy. And so that I could have skipped over some pain to get to, well, how do I do that? And how do I do this? And where should I go? And where should I start?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said about, the Bible and the way that we were raised and, and religion, let's just call it religion.
Yeah.
It works for people until it doesn't. And I find so many people, and I can't reveal any confidence, but I was just talking to a mother the other day. I talk to mothers all the time. So it's not no one will know who she is. I was talking to a mother the other day who's like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who God is anymore, because we have this Sunday school image of God that if we do the right things, that nothing bad will happen. And when we have something like this, then it's like suddenly we've got to start finding out for ourselves, and it's got to be more than just that superficial, kind of religion thing that we get. And you talked about, your church is here. I tell people my religion now is I've heard people say my religion is love, but I call it Bryanism. Because it's like I study Hinduism, I study Buddhism, I study the Tao, I study I've read a little bit of the Quran, I know the Bible really well, because my grandfather was a preacher, so I grew up in the church. So but I take all that stuff, and I also look at science, and so when you said I know, it's like I tell people, they're like, well, do you believe? I'm like, no, I know. At this point, I it's what I know, and I know it because there's so much out there. And I love that your book, because you give resources even in your book, right? About where people can go to find this stuff.
Yeah. 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 It's just everything that was gifted to me. I feel so lucky. I feel so fortunate because, to hear Bryan out loud with my ears just 3 weeks after he died. So it's like, I'm just a mom. There is nothing special about me. I am not psychic. I've not been seeing dead people since I was a little girl. But for me, it was that was they probably knew that's what it was going to take to get through to me, was something that extreme, because I knew nothing about any of this. And sometimes I laugh at how persistent Bryan has been. Because he's really had to just kind of do this with me a lot. So that's what I want to avoid. Other people you don't have to go through that. We'll get you started in the right direction. So I do a live Zoom thing now. I'm doing it through the end of December.
Oh, okay.
It's free on Monday nights, and we do a connection meditation. So that's free to everybody. I think Elizabeth has been posting it on the Helping Parents Heal Facebook page, but just because it shouldn't be a secret, right? That's why you're doing what you do. That's why we all do what we do. It's none of this should be a secret. And the days of believing that I have to go to a medium to get the answers to communicate with my child, yes, it's comforting. Yes, it's healing. Yes, I utilize that source. But is it necessary? No, because you can communicate with Shayna. I can communicate with Bryan. Everybody can communicate with their child. Some of us might get there a little quicker than others. What took me 12 years, not that I waited 12 years, but what I mean, might take somebody else 1 year or 5 years, because all of our journeys are different and we all have different belief systems. Sometimes they get in the way, and we have to learn, like the religion, we have to sometimes learn how to walk around that, and how to kind of ease ourselves into a new understanding and a new reality that will allow us to find our loved ones.
Yeah. Let's talk about how you communicate with Bryan. You said you got that time where he spoke to you audibly 3 weeks after his passing. Yeah. How is the communication? What's it like now? Well,
now, I guess the most physical thing that he does is he sends me these hugs where he, so I used to call it, I can't say out loud what I used to call it, but it used to be whenever I spoke a spiritual truth out loud, this spiritual tingle would come through my body. And I know many, many people probably in your audience can relate to that too, where after I had studied the spirituality enough and got to the point, I'm Reiki and pranic healing certified. So I've learned about energy. And so I got to the point somewhere along my journey where whenever I would speak kind of a profound spiritual truth, I guess, I would get this tingle, and I would be like, oh, that's my nod from God, from my spirit team, that I just spoke something that's truth. Well, Bryan does that times 1,000. He sends his energy through me, in me, through me, all the way through my arms and my hands and my legs and my feet. And I'm just almost vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it my Bryan hug.
Mm-hmm.
And seriously, it's intense. If I'm holding something, I oftentimes just have to drop it because I'm just like, I have to let it move through me. It is
Mm-hmm.
that intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to explain. But it's the most beautiful, amazing thing. And I've worked hard to get to this point where I can receive that from him. Because like I said, I'm not a natural at this. I've had to learn it. I had to go through years of doubt. And, the reason my book is called Choose to Believe is because even though I was communicating with him through mediums and he was sending me signs galore. I mean, we had so many signs and all of these great things. And still I'd be like, really? Like, did that really happen? Or, did you really just, was that really from him? And finally, Spirit said, listen, just choose to believe. Please, just choose to believe. Because if you would just believe, then eventually you will, right? Just choose to believe and eventually you will.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, because I couldn't fight it anymore. And I never gave up wanting it, right? And so I did. And everything kind of broke wide open. And so from that point forward, I started hearing him more clearly in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When if I'm in meditation on behalf of Bryan or another child, he'll kind of write through me. You heard the example I gave of Suzanne Wilson's reading that I was so blessed to receive in Arizona, probably at the very end of Suzanne Giesman's interview.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that. Where Bryan had spoken a phrase to me and Suzanne repeated it on the stage. And it had been years, first of all, and never had spoken those words to anybody. So it's such a validation. And that's why we go to mediums, is for the validation. But I can now get those hugs from Bryan and he can talk to me and I know it's him. I no longer question, is that really him? Am I just making it up? But I think we have to go through that. And that's what we talk about in the class that I'm doing is, it's a process of first opening ourselves up to the energy, learning how to get out of our mind and into our heart space. And I use mantra to help me instantly kind of get into the calmness. And then it's stillness. For me, I've had some amazing guided meditations, of which Dr. Mark's, Pit Sticks is one of them, the most incredible thing I actually believe I left my body during that meditation and went to visit Bryan and my loved ones in heaven. But for me, the silence is where the answers are. The silence is always where the answers are, right? It's the quiet, still place within us. That's where the answers are. And that's where we find our children or our spouse or our parent or our friend or our sibling.
Yeah. When you said to choose to believe, I think that was a really interesting way of putting it, because it really is a choice. It really is. And I see people, I've had people say, well, my son or daughter passed years ago, my mother, and I haven't gotten any signs at all. And I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, except for that dream I had when my mother came to me and told me that everything was going to be okay and she was young and healthy. Or I was talking to a young lady and she told me her mother had passed. And she said, I was really distraught one day. I was walking down the street and I was crying. And this woman stopped me and said, are you okay? They ended up having a long conversation. It turns out the woman that spoke with her mother passed when she was really young. And she spoke words to this young woman that changed her life. And she's talking to me. She said, well, I think that might have been a sign. I said, that certainly, was a sign. So we can choose to, when these things come along, and I'm an engineer, so I analyze them too. Because like Shayna's done things with my phone. Like one day, my podcast on my phone, she changed all the covers of all my podcasts to a picture that I had of her when she was 2 years old building with these blocks. Mm-hmm. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, what happened to my podcast? How did that happen? And this is everywhere. So then I went and checked, other places, and everywhere else, the podcast covers were the same as they always were, but only on my phone where they changed, and then they changed back.
I know. Don't you love that stuff? Gosh, I love it.
So I'm
I
like,
can't get enough.
So I'm like, okay, how did this is the engineer in me. How did this happen? Was it just a fluke? Could have just, but I to this day cannot figure out how that could possibly have happened. So I've had to say, okay, well, that was a sign.
That was
And
Shayna, right? Because there is no explanation for it.
yeah,
There is no, I mean, we had all of that. You know how they love to use technology in the early days. That really, I think, is truth. It's easier for them to manipulate electronics than it
mhm,
is to enter through and give us a hug, right? That's
yeah,
a little harder to enter through all of our energy bodies and,
mhm,
get to where we can feel them in that way. We have to really do the work to be open, I think, to receive that
yeah,
intensity. But oh my gosh, iPods coming on and off by themselves, TVs coming on and off, freezing. My phone would just flash his picture, just out of the blue, just all
mhm.
kinds of stuff that, I mean, that I think that's what gets us through. That's what gets us through those, particularly the first year or so, don't you think?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love what you said because as you said that, I was thinking, you said you talked about getting the hugs from Brian and how it takes a while to get there. And it reminds me, my friend Jake Samoyedny, who's a medium. You might know Jake.
I know the name.
So Jake he describes it as when we're in the heavy grief, it's like Crisco when it's solid and there's a feather sitting on top of it. Spirit's like the feather, and you need to melt the Crisco for the feather to be able to get through.
Oh, I love that.
And there's in those early days of that heavy grief, and it's so unfair because we tell parents, well, you have to raise your vibration, and they're like, well, I can't raise my vibration because I'm in grief. And so I guess the thing is, to be patient and to look for those other things. And I like the way you said that because it seems like they can get to us through technology, through light bulbs flashing on and off. In our case, it's our ceiling fan in our bedroom. Shayna would turn that on and off, and she doesn't do it much anymore. It's very rare that she does it now, but I think she comes to us in other ways.
Right. And as I think as they progress in the ways that they communicate with us, they become more meaningful and more just on a deeper level, right? Because I mean the way I receive Brian now is so much deeper than the ladybug that he sent me on my 50th birthday. All of that was huge.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, we have a big thing with ladybugs. That's our thing. But that's why I'm like, can I hold up my book?
yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay? So
Yeah,
it's Choose to Believe, and there's this. You see the stick, and there's a little ladybug up there in the light on the stick. So
uh-huh.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see it, but that's the ladybug. It's such a huge part of our path is the ladybug that he sends me, and he
Hmm.
sends me ladybugs because I asked him just kind of inadvertently, randomly one day to send me a ladybug.
Hmm.
And that night, the first ladybug came and they have never stopped coming. And
Yeah.
I never had a thing for ladybugs before. So not only do they send us those types of signs early in our grief, not only do they send us signs like that early in our grief, but they'll also give you what you ask for. I had a lady who she read that chapter in my book, and she stopped and she put the book down, and she was sitting at a river, and she put the book down and she asked her child for a sign at that moment after she read that chapter,
Hmm.
and then she got the sign that she asked for. So they're listening. They're listening. They
Yeah.
want to give us. They want to give us. But I love Jake's analogy, and I just always say it's just a gray shroud. It's a, it's
Hmm.
a, it's a, it's just like a big black gray cloud that we walk around with, and of course they can't penetrate that. They want us to come into the light and not have that shroud
Yeah.
around us, but we have to go through our mourning process. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to go through that. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think I agree, and I think it's really important to say that we have to be patient with ourselves,
yes,
because people say, "Well, I want to get there right now," and then when I tell people, there's no timeline on grief, but there are
yeah,
some general guidelines, and the first year is generally shock. It's just first year is usually I don't believe this. You're just kind of stumbling through. It's like a fog. And then I've also found, because we're going through the holidays right now. We're recording this at the beginning of December, in one of the worst years ever. So we're going through a lot of stuff right now. But those first holidays are rough, but sometimes the second holidays are even worse. That second year when it really sinks in. So it is a process, and what I try to tell people in the early part of it is just hold on. Just hold on and get through the days, and it will get better. Starting at a certain point in time.
And to be gentle with yourself and allow whatever comes up, allow it. I mean, I sat on my floor and screaming and kicking and pounding and tried to negotiate with God, and it wasn't going to work, but I did that. And I mean, we have to allow whatever comes up in us that day. And if it's to lay in bed and pull the covers over our head for a week or a month, then that's what we have to do. I mean, I'm not a proponent of, I'm a proponent of doing whatever it is somebody needs to do that day. But we have to find opportunities to be kind to ourselves. And so body work is critical. If people can afford massage or do yoga, do something at home to where you're stretching and moving your muscles, because grief will absolutely lock down in our muscles. It'll store there and lock down until we start to release it. So even though, yes, the first year is all about that, and the first year is all about tears, 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 I was like, I could not possibly have any more tears in my body. And then I would cry another bucket full, and it was just that way. I would watch films of him to make myself cry.
Yeah.
I mean, because I had to. I wanted to cry.
There's something about that. It's interesting because when Shayna, the summer after she passed, I discovered an album by a group called Evanescence. And the lead singer of the album, she had a sister transition when she was young. And so I'm listening to this album, and almost the whole album is about death and seeing the person again and going through your life. There's a song called The End of the Dream, because I'm running toward the end of the dream to see you again. And I'm like, what is it about listening to this music that makes me feel better? Because it makes me cry every time. But there's something about, you need to kind of flush that out of yourself. Yeah. And even to this day, I'll put on a song that reminds me of Shane, and I know that I'm going to cry when I do it. But there's something that's cathartic about it, I guess.
Well, it's healing, it's healing. And you probably on some level feel better afterward because you needed to release those tears. You needed to release. It's all about releasing our pain. And pain, let me tell you, I've had a lot of pain in my life, and none as great as, Bryan's death, but a lot of pain. And pain will, layer after layer after layer after layer of pain. And we have to whittle away at it a little bit at a time. So the more we can do things like moving our physical body, prayer and meditation, gratitude. These are the things that I laid out in my book. You probably talk about this in your book too, but just things that you can do to ease the pain just a little bit, or to help yourself get through the pain, I guess is a better way to say it, because I call them grief surges, where for the first couple of years, it's like, you're just driving down the street and you see that little boy at the bus stop, wearing the exact same outfit Bryan had on when he was in the first grade. And I had to pull over to the side of the road. It was such a trigger. And this was couple, 3, 4, 5 years in, right? So I call them grief surges, and what we can do about them to help us deal with them. Walking, physical activity. I also love to walk and hike. That's been a huge way, I guess, for me to relieve my pain and to get out of myself, because it's like, it's so weird, right? On one hand, we're saying, oh, you need to honor yourself and, cry, cry, cry. And on the other hand, we're like, well, but we want to go do these other things to help the pain move out of your body, because that's really the goal. We want to feel it. We have to feel it, but then we want to release it. If we don't release it, it stays stuck in us. And then it's hard to become bigger than our story. And this journey, the healing journey, is about becoming bigger than our story. In the beginning, it's all about our story. How did Bryan die? Let me tell you how Bryan died. And I tell that story, again and again and again. And then, people don't really want to hear it anymore, but I keep telling it until one day I didn't need to tell it anymore. Yeah. And, I think telling it in the book was maybe the last time I need to tell it, right? It's like we get to the point where our journey is just bigger than that. And I think that we find a place where we can appreciate the journey that we're on, and we can find gratitude in the journey that we're on. So, and I know for people that are newly grieving, that's impossible to even comprehend.
Yes.
But it's so true, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. And also, again, remembering what it sounded like to me when people talked about gratitude. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Gratitude practice, but I do it. It's a practice for me every day before I get out of bed. I think of 3 things I'm grateful for.
Good.
And it can be small things. The bed's warm. It's winter now. So the fact that the bed is warm, the fact that I can get up and I can go for a walk,
Right.
with COVID, I was waking up and like, I'm grateful that I can take a deep breath. So it doesn't have to be, big things. And it really, and it sounds silly, but it really will change your perspective on things if you make that a practice.
Yeah. And I like to ask people to add to their gratitude list, add what's one thing that you're grateful for to your beloved now after their death, and like start getting into that space of, okay, I have a new life with my beloved. I have a new relationship, because that's what I was like. George Anderson said, you can still have a relationship with your loved one. And I'm like, I can still have a relationship with him. Like, what's that going to look like? And so, so the whole journey, right, commenced. But start thinking about ways that you can be grateful to them. I am so grateful to Bryan for the hugs. I'm so grateful for that ladybug. I'm so grateful. And I would get a sign, and I'm telling you, I would get a sign and I'd be good for 2 weeks. I'd be like walking cloud 9 for 2 weeks. And then I want more. And then there were times where I felt so needy, and I'm like, I know I'm so needy, but I need more. And sometimes I ask for signs and I don't get them.
Right.
And that's when I go back to my journal. You want to write all your signs down, because when you don't get one, you can go back and remember the amazing miracles. I always called it my miracle journal.
Mm-hmm.
And because each and every sign from our beloved is a miracle. It's a miracle. Isn't that amazing that they can communicate with us in that way?
Yeah, it's really, you're right. It's really cool. And the thing about the ongoing relationship, because it sounds, again, when people in the early, I remember what it was like when I was early in the journey. It was like, what does that mean? Because she's not here anymore. I can't watch TV with her. We can't have pizza together. But I do talk to her every day. And I realized this was not too long ago. It's like, I talk to her more than I talk to my daughter that's still in the physical, because my daughter in the physical doesn't live with us. So I only see her every few weeks. So, but Shayna, I literally talk to every day. So it's the first thing I'd say when I get up in the morning is I tell her good morning, because we have a big picture of her outside of our bedroom window. So when I walk out of the room, I say good morning to her. When at night, when I'm taking my dog out for the last time, I say good night to her. So I talk to her more now than I would, she'd be 21 now. So she wouldn't be living here. She'd be away at college.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Say Bryan would be 35 or something crazy. Gosh, I can't. It's like, that blows my mind. My stepdaughter, my daughter, she is just 6 months older than Bryan. So I'm always like, oh, that's how I think of everybody now, is in terms of, well, how old would Bryan be? So you must be this. Everything's in terms of, AB after
Mm-hmm.
Bryan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Before Bryan and after Bryan. That's how I think of my life now. AB or BP. There's these crazy birds right now. I got to tell you, these crazy birds, like I almost feel like they're going to hit the house. Like,
oh, really?
They're flying all around this outside. It's I'm like, ooh, I don't like that movie, The Birds. They're big black birds.
Oh, yeah.
So let's hope that's not a sign.
Sometimes it's in the signs we don't want them to.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. Shayna likes to mess with my computer. I remember one time my computer just started acting really weird. And I called the repair shop and said, you're probably going to need a new computer. My hard drive I was trying to repair it. It took me like several days. And finally, it just started working again. And I was just resigned. I was going to buy a new computer. And like a week later, I had a reading with the medium. She said, Shayna said she likes to mess with your computer. And I said, Shayna needs to stop breaking things, because we had an outlet in the kitchen that stopped working. It was a GFI outlet, and it just kept tripping. It wouldn't stay in the right position. So I was just getting ready to leave to go buy another one and call an electrician to have it replaced. I said, I'm going to try it one more time. And I hit the reset button and it stuck. It stayed where we're supposed to be.
I love it.
Yeah. So I'm like, so sometimes they do things that was like, it's a little mischievous.
I love how you talk to her that way too, just so casual, like she were right. Like, Shayna, you need to quit breaking things. I mean, that's so right. Like, she's just like still here right next to you, that you talk to her in a casual. That's how I talk to Bryan too. And I said in the book, and it's in some it's hard to put into words, but in some ways I'm even closer to Bryan now than I was when he was alive,
Yeah.
in body,
Hmm.
because, man, he pushed my triggers, man, all the time. He did. He just liked to do that. We were
Hmm.
so much alike. He is so much like me. And I know that it doesn't offend him for me to say that out loud to people, we're so close now. We were so close then, but it really is kind of a deeper level now because it's a soul to soul communication.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, do I want him back in the physical? Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But I would be sad to give up what we have now at the same time, if that makes any
It
sense.
does. Shayna was a very strong-willed child. I remember when she was, well, we knew it from literally the day she was born. The nurses at the hospital, the night she was born, said, you're going to have your hands full with this one. And when she was 2, I said, I hope she uses her powers for good and not for evil, because she was just, anything she wanted to accomplish, she would. So she was 15 and a half when she passed. I think we probably avoided, we did avoid the 16, 17, 18, 21, all the fights we would have had.
Yeah.
But I feel like now Shayna is a partner. So that's something I wouldn't have felt if she had been here, because she is a part of she's the reason why I do what I do. And she's a part of what I do. So now she's my partner.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. I always ask Bryan, go gather up those kids now.
Yeah.
Go gather up those kids, bring them on in. And I know that he is. I know that he does do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, so it's weird, to say that to people, and they're like, cause it's both. It's just one of those things that we can hold both things at the same time. I miss her tremendously. I would love to have her back. I would give anything to have her back. But there is some blessing in this, and the fact that, which is the most important thing, that I will see her again.
Yes.
So I always have that hope in front of me.
Yes. Yes. And we're not afraid to die, right? Like I used to be so afraid of dying. And now I know, I mean, show me a parent whose child is in spirit that doesn't say, I'm not afraid to die now,
I haven't
because
met one yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we know that they're going to be there. I've actually seen it firsthand. And my grandma came to me 3 weeks before Bryan died in a dream. And
Mm-hmm.
she told me, I didn't remember what she told me. All I knew is she said, it's okay, you will be with us soon. So I thought I was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course it turned out to be Bryan who died. So I think my grandma came to prepare my soul for the time, that the time is near. This is what, we talked about this.
Yeah.
And then in an automatic writing years later that I did, Spirit said, we know this is harder than you thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And boy, howdy, because I always say, I am not ever doing this again.
We all say that.
Please don't ask me to do this again. It was too hard.
Yeah, we all say that. All of us parents say that. And it's funny because I even tell people now, it's like, yeah, it's just like when people get a hangover, they say, I'm never going to drink again.
Right.
We'll get back over there and we'll forget, and we'll say, yeah, I'll do it again.
Oh, maybe I've lived my last. Maybe I don't have to come back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that say that they're never going to do it again, but I said it myself. I don't know. I'm saying now I don't know.
I know. The healing journey is one, though, that, I mean, for us to be able to sit here, and you after only 5 years, to be able to sit here and say, yes, that we can see some of the gifts in our grief journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that on some level, we have components of our new relationship with our child that we love and we cherish and we're grateful for, right? Mm-hmm. So for us to be able to sit here and say that gives other people hope. And that's really what the journey, I feel like the journey is never over. It is a journey. It'll never be over. But it really is about kind of you just want to keep progressing forward and getting to this point where you can find gratitude and peace in this reality that our child died, right? Because if we don't get to that point, I feel like it's a life of sadness. Whereas if we can get to that point, then I feel like we really have opened up potential, which I know I feel, and it seems that you do as well, for a life that truly does have joy again. Whereas before, we never thought that would even be possible ever again.
Yeah, we're back to that choice thing again, because the way I look at it is, I've got so much time I called it a prison sentence at first. When Shayna first died, I'm like, I got a prison sentence. I don't know how long it is. I don't really see it so much as a sentence anymore. But whatever time I have left, I can either choose to make it fulfilling or I could choose to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's like, I might as well choose to make it fulfilling, while I'm going to be here, because the days are the same either way. They're the same amount of time.
That's right. And it's like we have choices every day anyway, right? It's like we choose, we can choose to have a good day or a bad day. We can choose to get mad at the person who just, cut us off on the road, or we can choose to just, take a deep breath and not say anything. That's my biggest challenge in life right now.
Yeah.
So we have choices all the time. We can choose to take care of our body or not. We can choose to drink water. We can choose to, anything. And we can choose to pray. We can choose not to pray. We can choose to reach out to somebody else. We can choose not to do that. I mean, constantly, every day, all day long, we make choices. This is another choice. And I'm just here to tell you, it's another choice that if you make it, it will lead you toward a good place on your healing journey.
Yeah. I agree. And it's, I guess I'm almost 60. So it's something we learn after a while, because people, I think we think we don't have a choice. The way we feel. I was listening to a book this morning, and the guy starts off with the premise of, we can't control our feelings, so we can only control what we do. And I'm like, I got to push back on that a little bit. I think we can control our feelings to a certain extent, not directly, but if we can learn to choose our thoughts wisely, our thoughts can control our feelings, and we can choose gratitude or choose to be in sorrow.
Right.
It is a choice we can make.
And our words, the words that we choose to say. I used to always say, I'm just forever broken. I'm forever broken.
Yes.
I'll never be happy. I mean, I'll never be happy. I'm just, I'll never stop crying. I'll never this, I'll never that. I'll never heal. I'll never, and words have power. And it's when we choose we have to write a different story. It's like, is this the story we want to write? And is this where we want to stay? Or do we want to write a new story? And what would that look like? If you could put yourself, 2 or 3 or 4 years into your journey, if your child just died, and if you could project 2, 3, 4 years into your future, what do you see? What do you want that to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to still be saying to yourself, I will never heal. I will never get over this. You know what I mean? I will never, 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 never. And or would you choose to have a life that says, I am healing, and I miss my child, but I'm so grateful for, and so those are things that we have a choice to make all the time. And I think it's an interesting exercise to go through, because people don't realize that the actions they take today will affect their reality tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Yeah, that's I love the way you put that. I think that's so important, because even though I felt like I was never going to heal, I remember going to a meeting of parents whose children had died, and there was a woman there. It was about 10 or 15 years after her daughter had died. And she's like, I still go to the gravesite, like it was like every day or something. And she was just as angry as she was the day she died. I'm like, okay, even though I said I'm not going to heal, I know I don't want to be that woman. So at least I set a goal for myself. It's like, if I'm going to be here, because that wasn't a given, but if I'm going to be here, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah, there you go. I used to teach, I used to do Helping Parent Heal in-person classes in Boise. I started the Boise chapter. And then I used to do grief classes. This is a long time ago, like 2014, maybe, I can't remember. And I would have these grief classes and workshops that I was doing for people. And I had this one woman, and, God love her, but she did not want to heal. She really liked her story, and she wanted to stay in her story. And that's fine. If that's what she chooses, then that's fine. And that's her path. But I just realized I couldn't help her, because I can only help somebody who wants to heal. We have to want to heal. And so sooner or later, she'll get to the place, I hope, and I pray that she'll want to heal. But until we do want that, well, the universe will give us what we ask for. And we can choose to keep telling ourselves those same old stories and use those words of never and always. And, those words that are so belittling and so keep us just stagnant. Yeah.
I want to ask you one last question. If you could pick one tool that helped you the most, what would that tool be?
Meditation.
Okay.
Hands down. I don't even have to think about it. It was just, I tried so hard to meditate. I had these, I don't even remember what they were, but these free guided, meditations, or some of them I purchased. And have you read my book? I hate to just say everything, but
No,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm sorry. I'll tell you a story that's in the book that I just could never, it's like, okay, close your eyes and, walk down the path, and you get to the bridge and you go over the bridge. And, I would do all that. And I'm like, with this anticipation. And then, I'd get to the beach and then through the fog. And then I would just start crying. And I couldn't get there. I couldn't get to that point where they said, and here comes your beloved. And, I just couldn't get to that point.
Yeah.
And so I tried and tried and tried. But the thing is, I never quit trying. I tried again and again and again. I tried every day. And finally, one day, I saw Bryan approaching me through the fog.
Oh, wow.
And then that, and we hugged, and that, I just cried like a baby. But there's, oh shoot, I'm going to forget his name. If I think of it, I'll let you know. Craig Hogan.
Okay, great.
Craig, he does some amazing, I did his meditations. I met Bryan many times in Craig's work. I met my dad, who passed in 2012, in his work. So he has some very powerful guided meditations. Dr. Mark Pickstick with his meditation was tremendous for me at the last conference that Helping Parents Heal did in Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was huge for me. So meditation has just been, and now I've learned over the last 5 years or so, I do mantra. I repeat the Om Namah Shivaya, which means I bow to the divine God. And there is such power in mantra that I just recite the mantra, and I can almost immediately be in that restful, peaceful place where I can connect with Bryan. And so that's my tool.
Yeah.
A lot of people use, pendulum and things like that. And I was talking about this last night, and that's great. It's just, and that was the first tool I learned, actually, was pendulum to communicate. And for me, it just wasn't the right one. And I just knew that. And I knew that meditation in silence was going to be, I just knew that that's what I needed and wanted. And that's what's proven to be true for me. So.
Yeah, I think it's important to let everybody know that everybody has a different path, a different way. I interviewed a young woman a little while ago who people told her to meditate after her mother passed away and do yoga. And she said it was too quiet for her. So her mind would just start racing. So she tried different things. It ended up being weightlifting was a thing for her. But anything that we can do mindfully, it does. So when people hear meditation, like I have to sit cross-legged in silence, it could be a walking meditation. It could be going for a walk.
Yes.
For me, I like guided meditations. I also like listening to meditative music. Like I listen to a lot of kirtan music when I'm doing my meditations, and I find that works for me. So everybody needs to find what works for themselves. But I like some sort of mindfulness. I think is really important for everybody to try to find.
And that's really what the mantra does is help you stay focused so that your mind doesn't wander.
Right.
And the other thing for me was hiking. I mean, we're so blessed. We have these beautiful foothills that surround our valley here in the Boise Valley. And I hear Bryan so clearly when I'm hiking on those. I like the dirt, and he just speaks to me, and God speaks to me. My God speaks to me in my church when I'm out in the hills. And I just love it. So those two things saved my life. I like to believe, well, Bryan saved my life. If he hadn't have come to me, and if I had not heard him out loud with my ears, which is what launched me on my spiritual journey, I may not be here today. I may have chosen a different path. But he did. And God and the universe continued to put opportunities in front of me. And thank the Lord, I followed those opportunities, and I said yes, 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 yes to every one. And even though fighting all the way, many times had to be nudged numerous times by them before I acted. And the rewards are tremendous. The rewards are beyond my wildest expectations. And I know that's easy for me to say now because it's been 12 years. So It's like I say that, and I know how impossible that can sound to some of you whose loved one has died, in the last couple of years. But I'm just here to tell you my story and my truth, and to tell you that that can be your truth too. So that's why we wrote the book. My son channeled a lot of the book and really wrote a lot of it. He was a very beautiful, gifted writer, and obviously still is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Paige, it's been wonderful having you. I appreciate you being so open and willing to share, to help other people heal, what your journey has been, and to be an example of where we can, aspire to get to, whether it's been, 5 weeks or 5 months or 5 years, since our loved one, transitioned, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. If we just got to, get through it.
There is. And to not be afraid, because this year, 2020 is all about authenticity, I think. And we're really being called to open up to our true selves, I feel like. And when I put this book out this year, I mean, there's some stuff in there. People might think I'm crazy. And I finally am at the point where I don't care. I don't care if they think I'm crazy. I know I'm not crazy. Other grieving people will know that I'm not crazy. But we have to not be afraid. We have to just trust in the process, trust in our God, trust in our loved one, that they're going to hold our hand and guide us along the way. And to just believe that you can get through this. You can get through this. And that there is, as you say, light at the end of the tunnel. So there is joy in life again. Yeah. So Paige, we will see them again, as you say.
We will. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this, and you have a good night.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Bryan.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to make it really easy for you to reach me. So just send me a text to 31996 and simply text the word growth, GROWTH. In fact, you can right now just say, "Hey Siri," send a message to 31996. And when Siri asks you what you want to send, just say growth. You can do the same thing with OK Google. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Grief to Growth. Bryan hopes that you find this episode helpful and will come back for future episodes. Bryan's best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted Not Buried, is a great resource for anyone who is coping with grief or knows someone who is. If you enjoy the podcast and would like to support it, there are 3 things you can do to help. The first is to share the podcast with someone that you think it will help. The second is to go to iTunes, rate, and review the episode. The third way you can support the podcast is by becoming a patron. Head over to www.patreon.com/grief2growth. That's patreon.com/grief, the number 2, growth, and sign up to make a small monthly donation. Patrons get access to exclusive bonus content and knowledge that you are helping to spread the message of grief to growth. For more about Bryan and Grief to Growth, visit www.grief2growth.com.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grieftogrowth.circle.so. That's grief, the number 2, growth.circle.so, to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.